And welcome back to the Solo Moviegoers Club. This is, our 8th episode?
Yeah.
Exciting. And for this week, we saw Let's Start a Cult. This is actually a unique one. I have a confession to make because of some things happening in my personal and family life and some work travel. I was unable to see this in a theater. But thanks to the wonderful people at specifically Justin DiPietro at Dark Sky Films and MPI Media Group, he gave me a screener of the film. I told him about our podcast. He thought it was cool. He said he hopes to do something similar with his daughter one day. But I did buy a ticket to the movie. Just proof to support
supporting.
it.
Yeah,
to support it. I vote with my wallet.
Yeah.
But anyways, this is the Solo Movie Score. This is the Solo Moviegoers Club podcast, a podcast in which me, Sean, and my daughter Kaya have to go see the same movie in a theater, even though I wasn't in a theater this week, within 24 hours of each other, and then we cannot read anything about the movie, we cannot discuss the movie until we meet here on this podcast and talk about it. So, since I wasn't in a theater this week, I want to hear about your theater experience.
So it was actually so weird. They were only playing it at a couple of places and only for like 3 days. Same thing with like the Paul McCartney in the Wings movie. But I get there and I'm in Burbank and already I'm like one of the last people to show up. But it's like all either teenagers, there was a huge group of teenagers and then there was a ton of old people, like tons of old people in groups.
In this movie?
Yeah.
That is not the demographic I would think.
No, like not at all. Like there was an old guy who did walk out. I'll just say that. But like it was not what I was expecting at all.
Let me guess when he walked out.
Guess.
I'm gonna guess the one insane love scene.
Someone did, yeah.
There was a walkout there.
Someone walked out like literally like 15 minutes in.
Well, that's what happened with me with Terrifier. But okay, so anyways, tell me else about your experience. Tell me about like your coffee situation, what the theater was like, etc.
God, I was like so busy that day, and the only movie time was like 2-ish. So I drank coffee before, and I was super jittery during the movie. It just heightened the emotions of all of the things going on in that movie. But yeah.
Yeah, this was a wild one. So we also give a 2-minute summary of the movie. I wanted Kaya to do this one, but she deferred to me.
I'm not doing these.
So let me give you a completely unprepared 2 minutes. Kaya, you tell me what I'm missing. Okay. This movie opens with some VHS video footage of cult members. We've seen this used before. It's like the Gaspar Noé film Climax does it really well, but it shows people being interviewed for something, and in this case, we come to learn very quickly on this is their tapes that they're leaving behind when their cult is going to exit. We learn about the different cult members. We see who the leader is. You're traditionally sort of charismatic, like musical, artsy guy who's become a cult leader, probably a failed artist of some sort. And then we get to Stavros, who's the sort of like the main draw of this film, whose character from the very beginning, it's so effective in seeing that this guy just does not fit into this group, but also very much seems like a true believer. He seems like he really loves this cult, but you come to figure out that he's the guy they give all the bad tasks to.
Yeah.
So on the day of what's going to be their ritual suicide, two of the other members baked a cake, and they go to get the cake to celebrate the moments before their exit, and the cake is like 3/4 gone. And Chip, Stavros' character, his name was Chip.
Yes.
Chip is continually like, no, we don't need the cake. And so finally they go to get the cake, and it's gone, and obviously he ate the cake. So they send him into town to take the tape with all of their suicide messages that we saw from the beginning of the movie. He goes into town, and they give him money to get himself a slushie. So, of course, he gets the slushie before he drops the tape off at the post office box. And, of course, he spills the slushie on the tape. And all of this leads to he gets left out of the suicide ritual. And so he goes back into the town to drop off the tape again. He comes back. Everybody's dead. He sees them all dead. And he returns to his family, who's very happy to see him. It's the 90s, by the way. It's like 1999, maybe. Sort of
Yeah.
inexplicably late 90s, early 2000s. I think the only reason was so they could have a VHS tape that he could have to go mail, and also so that they could avoid cell phones. But it's 90s, 2000, or maybe 2000, and he starts working for his family selling gravel. He hates it. He's miserable. He sucks at it, most importantly. They're really mean to him about it. They eventually fire him, and he's left on his own to try to figure out life. And as he's doing this, he sees a clown, a sad clown on the side of the road. And the sad clown looks suspiciously like the cult leader, the guy who used to follow. And so he goes and he starts talking to him. It turns out this guy didn't die. He claims that Chip saved his life, and he's now making a living out in the world. This is going way over 2 minutes. I'm going to speed this up a little. Chip and the former cult leader, they decide, like, what else are they going to do? They've lived. They survived the ritual suicide. They need to start another
we
cult.
have to keep in mind, too, that, like, Chip was going to go to the cops about this, but the cult leader had to make it seem as though he survived the suicide to, like, go out with Chip. So that's, like, the only reason why this ex-cult leader is agreeing to do all of this. Like, he just wants to avoid the public. That's why he's a clown now, you know?
Yeah,
So.
he's working in a clown doing children's birthday parties really poorly.
Yeah.
He recruits Chip to start doing this with him. They eventually steal a car, and this becomes a zany road trip movie from this point on, where they're picking up other people who are becoming members of their cult, but these people don't realize they're becoming members of a cult. They just kind of think they're like hanging out, going on this road trip. They eventually start to put in some like ideas that this is a belief group of some sort that's going to a place. They're going to, what's the name of the cult leader? I forgot his name.
I can't remember. I can look it up.
Okay, yeah, but the cult leader he's got a house that they're going to, this beautiful house on a lake where they're going to go, and Chip keeps
He lied about his name. He went by like Will and Billy and like whatever. Like he lied. So
yeah, he lied. He did lie about his name. Yeah, his real name was Billy, right?
Yeah, but he went
That's
by
what the guy
or Will.
That's what the guy they see later on who knows him.
Yeah.
And so they are collecting these different people who are all sort of like lovable losers in their own way. The one guy who they get, his supposed fiance like clearly wants nothing to do with him. She's with some other guy. They're sharing this apartment. It's really weird. He's the only one that doesn't think that it's weird. The girl that they pick up, she had just lost custody of her kid, and everything's going bad for her. So like there's people who are a really interesting cast of characters, including Chip, who like are failing in every imaginable way in life, but they don't realize it. And it makes them like really endearing characters.
Yeah.
And then they've got this one sociopath, William, who is leading them, and he just wants these people around to essentially like do his bidding and feel better about himself. But he's a loser in his own way. Yeah. He's actually the only loser of them all by the time you get to the end. But they go on a road trip. Hijinks ensue. They eventually make it to this house that the cult leader William said he owned, and it turns out that his aunt owned it, and his aunt died, and his aunt had been trying to get a hold of him, but he hadn't contacted her in 6 years, and so the aunt gave the property to her friend, who is a former pro wrestler who Chip was obsessed with.
Yeah.
So they're about to get kicked out of the place, and then Chip essentially seduces this former pro wrestler. And there is this pretty wild, epic, very graphic love scene that takes place between the two of them that is nuts. And they end up getting to stay there. And
William is trying to get out of this entirely, and he's the one recording on the camera that Chip brings with them for the journey, and he manipulates it to look like Chip was the leader all along for the cults, and he takes it to the news, and now like the cops are after them. And although like the people that they met along the way are upset that they feel manipulated that they're going to do like some suicide ritual, they end up wanting to help Chip, and in the end, like things get sorted with the cops and
Well, they end up what they end up doing. What I the only part I can't remember is how exactly. Oh, he just disappears, right? William just disappears. That's what happens. He disappears in the middle of the night, and they go looking for him. And don't they see his body floating in the water or something? And then they think that he's gone and he's transcended. But in reality, he just went to the cops and he used the tape that Chip was in to say they used the tape that he made to say that Chip was the leader, but then Chip and his crew end up while he's giving an interview, William, to like whatever their version of 2020 is.
yeah.
They sneak behind him and they find the old tape that Chip never took to the post office.
Yeah.
And so
that's why that was relevant to say like the thing.
That's why that whole thing is relevant, is because he screwed up delivering the tape to the post office for a second time, and he hid it. He hid it in the barn where the cult lived, and so he ends up, through his own slackerness, ends up saving himself and being able to incriminate William, because the tape in it is clearly William has positioned himself as the leader of this cult.
Yeah.
The previous cult, the cult that actually did commit suicide, the cult that went through with it, with the exception of the two of them. So, and then Chip is able to free himself, and so really his crew has gone through this journey. They've learned about themselves, they've survived, and they put William in jail. No, they don't put him in jail. They kill him, actually. Well, no, they do.
He doesn't die.
They kill him and they put him in jail. So what happens is that they had put... they put... William kept putting Chip out in this barn to sleep, and he like didn't have adequate weaponry to protect himself out there. All he had was this machete. So he like hung the machete in some sort of like security, home-built rope-powered security system. Yeah. So they end up... William steps into Chip's trap set 6 years earlier and gets macheted in the head, but surprisingly doesn't die. That's like the end of the movie twist, is that he didn't die.
Yeah.
But they know that he's guilty. And it is... Okay, first of all, that is the worst summary I've ever given of a movie, by the way. Ever.
Yeah.
But maybe worse than the substance. It might be worse than the substance. Oh my God, that was terrible.
We still do not have out.
Which we still don't have
never
out.
See the light of day.
No, I feel like most of these summaries are pretty good, but every once in a while it's a swing and a miss. So anyway, what'd you think?
So, I felt like it was giving a parody sort of movie, very much like American Pie, or like My Generation, like Fred movie, like comedian movie. I enjoyed it though, and I think I watch H3, the podcast, a lot, and he calls him Stavros. I don't know how to pronounce his name properly, but he is like one of my favorite comedians, and I mean, it wasn't like my favorite writing or like my favorite jokes because it was exaggerated, but I still had fun. Like, it was a fun movie to watch for sure.
I liked the exaggerated jokes a lot. It reminded me of a movie, a road trip movie from the 90s, like Tommy Boy.
Yeah.
Or Road Trip being one of the great examples. I think that these movies that are just packed front to back with zany situations and jokes and larger than life characters, and especially like the lovable losers, you don't see those characters as much anymore. I feel like, okay, a lot of people are going to disagree with this, but I feel like comedy got so overtaken, like comedic movies in particular, by like the Judd Apatow brand of comedy, which is a comedy that then becomes a drama and it gets really serious at some points. And I think just the zany never takes itself too seriously, not afraid to be politically incorrect, kind of gross out humor, road trip comedy movies. These were a staple for a long time. Like, these movies existed in the 80s, they existed in the 90s. They stopped making them when comedic movies became so kind of self-serious and like important. And the fact that this movie was made and the fact that it was put in theaters is just incredible to me. Like, I'm
Yeah.
so happy that it exists and that it's getting a real release.
I have to say, it was probably one of the best movie going crowds I've seen. Like, the group of teenagers were like screaming, like, there's no way this is happening right now. Like, everyone was talking and everyone was like dying the whole time just because it was like jam packed back to back stuff. Like, it was good. It was a good experience. And it was short. It was so short, like, perfect. So,
Yeah, and obviously this movie wasn't made for a ton of money,
yeah.
but it didn't necessarily feel like it. Like, I didn't feel like it was showing its budget ever, but it also, in a good way, it felt like a movie that was made by a group of friends.
It did
Like,
feel that way for sure.
which I really liked about it. I think the subject matter, I mean, it's kind, like, obviously this movie, who knows, hopefully it does really great. I don't think movies like this really do that well in theaters anymore. I don't know if they ever did. I don't know if independent comedies have ever really like had their moment in theaters. Right now, obviously horror is like the only thing. Horror and like tentpoles are the only things that tend to work. But I think that people are missing this. I think that there's not enough like this that exists. It's a movie that's just like it's about a cult, so it's wild subject matter that's a little irreverent, but it's just fun beginning to end. I haven't seen anything like this in a long time.
Yeah.
I feel like anything that would be made like this is TV.
Yeah.
It's
It
like an
felt
HBO
so
TV series.
2000s. It felt like yeah, like I went to the theater when I was like 6 and watched it.
Yeah, it definitely. Yeah, it could have been a 2000s movie. I mean,
Yeah.
it felt like the era. It felt like a movie that would have been made in the era in which it took place.
For sure.
What didn't you like about it?
Honestly, just some of the jokes just weren't like landing for me. Like it wasn't it was just like it's like childish humor. So like it was like at some points, but it like I was still like laughing and smiling like this is like so stupid, you know?
Yeah, there's a thing that movies do that I liked that this did, where each character sort of seems like they're in their own movie.
Yes, for
Like,
sure.
like personality wise, that like I don't know if it's an acting decision, a directing decision, or if it's in the writing, but each character is so drastically different from all of the others that they're just, and that's what's so cool about seeing this car full of 4 people together on these journeys, and then every other person that they meet is like just as loud. Like there's a guy that they meet at a like an RV park he's like trying to hook up with the girl in their group, and she uses that to try to like trick him to get out of his RV, and then they steal his RV. But anyways, this is a guy that knew William in high school. And that guy's just like a big dirtbag character. And then the former pro wrestler that ends up being William's aunt's friend who's inherited his house. She's a big character. Like everybody's a unique character in their own way, but like everything from acting style to the way that the character's story fits into the world just feels like it's like maximalist, I guess.
It was very maximalist.
And I think that's really fun. This movie must have been so much fun to make.
It really was truly just like back to back to back conflict, or like the most ridiculous thing that could happen did happen. And I loved that.
Yeah, there's this. I'm gonna butcher this, but there's something like that. Do you remember that documentary? What's it called? 6 Days to Air, I think, about the South Park, the way they write and produce a
Yes.
South Park episode. There's a thing in that where they talk about their version of writing, which is like there's 2 kinds of writings. They're writing. There's this happens, and then this happens, and then this happens, and then there's writing that's this happens, which causes this to happen, and then that happens because this happens. It's like this constant additive thing, and I felt like this movie did that really well. Like there was never
Yeah.
a scene that happened just because they needed a new scene to start. Like everything was a snowball effect from
For sure.
the last thing that happened. Like I thought it was really well written, and I think it's like pretty bold to make a movie like this in an era where movies like this don't exist, and it's bold to put it in theaters. And I hope that it's doing well. I don't know. I haven't checked to see if it's doing well
Well, when I was looking up that character name, I know we're probably not going to do too many Rotten Tomato reviews. It did well, like high rating on Rotten Tomatoes.
That's awesome. I mean, this feels like
Yeah.
a movie that would have been at Sundance or South by Southwest 10 years ago.
Yeah, for sure.
I mean, it didn't feel horribly indifferent, I guess, vibe-wise from like A Dinner in America.
That's what I was thinking. Or like Napoleon Dynamite or something. Like, or it kind of reminded me of like Scott Pilgrim, Juno, that sort of vibe.
Yeah, I can see
Just
that.
a lot.
And those movies used
What
to
is
be...
that? What is that style? Like, that's like the best kind of movie for me, I feel like.
I don't know what that style would be. I mean, that's just like 90s indie comedy. I don't know what the style or like subgenre actually would be. Those to me are just like mid 90s to mid aughts festival comedies.
If you told me that this was written and filmed in that era, I would believe you.
Yeah, or
Like,
even
it was so
reminded me.
that.
There's this movie I love that's probably, speaking of Rotten Tomatoes, this movie probably has like a 0.2% on Rotten Tomatoes, but there's this Jake Gyllenhaal movie where he's the bubble boy. That is a zany road trip movie. Oh, you've got to see this movie. It's from 2001. It's just called Bubble Boy. It's an hour and 26 minutes long. Jake Gyllenhaal looks insane in it.
I've heard of it.
It's so good. Yeah, 32% on Rotten Tomatoes. That's about what I would think it would be.
Okay, why are some of the best movies like 30%? It's like when I think of a good like a Will Ferrell movie, like Blades of Glory or something. Like this really reminded me of a movie like that.
Because historically, critics are biased against any sort of like hard genre movie. So whether it's a horror movie, those critically have been panned, except for like some, like The Shining got panned when it first came out.
Oh, I didn't know
Now
that.
it's considered the greatest horror movie of all time.
Yeah.
Also critics tend to be biased against like zany comedies.
Yeah.
This kind of thing typically doesn't get reviewed well. I don't know why. I don't know why everything has to be like serious art. Can't something just be funny? And like there's just as much of an art to that. You know what this actually reminds me of? The only stuff that gets made like this now is like the Danny McBride camp of HBO series, Eastbound and Down. That's the Kenny Powers one.
I don't know if that
You haven't
one
seen
is.
this? It's so good, it's so funny. You would love that. You would love it. This feels like
Send
a
it to me.
version of that type of humor. Or they've got the show now where it's like all their same characters they always have, but they run a mega church together. It's a family that runs a mega church. It's like Succession set in a mega church, and it's just
Wow.
crazy comedy. It's super gross. But those guys. I'm blanking. I'm off today. I don't know why, but those guys have a company that they all make like this kind of, there's a name for their company, Rough House. That's what it is.
Oh, yeah, okay.
It's like its own genre of comedy. And
Yeah.
this feels spiritually aligned with that, which is interesting that can work so successfully on TV, but isn't in movies anymore.
Yeah, that's crazy.
And those guys don't even, I think, they make some movies now. I think they have a movie that's out, and they made a bunch of Halloween movies and other horror movies. But I don't know if they do comedy movies anymore. Does Will Ferrell do comedy movies anymore? Like, who's out there making wacky comedy?
I don't think he does. Adam Sandler.
Oh,
Movie
yeah,
Halloween.
Adam Sandler.
It's giving
Movie
movie Halloween.
But yeah, Adam Sandler is doing that. He's got his Netflix deal, and he just makes whatever he feels like making.
Yeah.
So interesting aside. So when at the beginning of this movie, I've always wanted to make a cult movie, and
I was thinking
both.
about you the whole time.
Oh, why? Because it's a movie about losers.
Shut up. No.
So I don't know if I've ever told you this story, but I was going to make a short film about the Heaven's Gate cult. This is years ago. This is way before the Heaven's Gate documentary series. And I was in contact. I had a way that I wanted to do it that was like a hybrid with reenactments, some reenactments, and then I wanted to do it. I didn't want to make it about Heaven's Gate the suicide cult, I wanted to make it about the way they made their money. Do you know how Heaven's Gate lived? Like what they did to make money? They had a web design firm. And
Whoa.
so they were like, if you go to the Heaven's Gate cult website right now, it's beautiful. It's just stunning. Like this stunning mid 90s, early 90s, like bright and colorful. Like the aesthetic, I would say, is similar to like Nyan Cat.
Wow.
It's amazing. You have to check this out. But
I'm
anyways,
looking at it right now.
I kind of became obsessed with it and the fact that they did web design. So I wanted to make like somewhere between a hybrid mockumentary and documentary about the web design firm and just never mention that they were a suicide cult. And like I wanted to interview people who worked with them and see, because all the people that I could find who had worked with them as a web design firm were like, yeah, they were amazing. They designed on time. The price was really good. They were super reliable. And like everything you could say was great. But then on the side, they believe that they need to commit mass suicide so that their souls end up on this comet. But here's where this becomes even more relevant to this particular movie, is that through this process, I communicated with Mark and Sarah King, who are the two survivors of Heaven's Gate. They're the archivists. So they were super polite too, by the way, and really cool. And they were like willing to give me access to all their archivals, but they had all the VHS tapes. They were the ones who like took the famous tapes of all the Heaven's Gate members giving their like confessionals. They're the ones who handed that over to the media. So they're essentially like the more responsible version of Stavros's character from this movie. And obviously this drew inspiration, I'm sure, from Heaven's Gate and from plenty of other cults, especially around that time. There were tons of cults right around the like mid 90s, 2000s.
Yeah.
It was something to do with the millennium and people fearing the world was going to end and just that changeover. And by the way, like, why are we as humans so dumb? Like the Earth knows that it's 1999 to 2000 based on a calendar that we made up.
I don't know.
There's so much of that around then. But yeah,
It still lingers.
it still does linger as we go into an election year and people are collectively losing their minds.
Yeah.
A lot of times when I see a movie that's about something that I've been interested in, I'm like, okay, I guess I'm not going to do that because that's already been done. But this was such a specific cult movie that I feel like there's plenty of cult runway left to do some kind of other cult thing.
For sure.
But I also like that it was a cult comedy.
It's different. I don't know. I feel like cults are one of the most interesting subject matters for a movie or TV show.
But why? Why is it? I agree with you, but why are cults so interesting?
It's because truly getting in that mindset is something that like I personally can't really understand. I don't understand how people are so susceptible to that, and I also don't understand necessarily the inner workings of cults, but like learning about it is cool.
I guess where do things go from just a group of people hanging out and like having a shared belief system to a cult, and why do so many cults have to end in suicide?
I don't know.
Or do we only hear about the cults that end in suicide?
For sure. Or like if something bad happens to like a member or something, like if you think about like Nexium or something, or like even Scientology,
debatable whether it's a cult, lots of people will claim it is interesting because everyone knows about it, but it hasn't ended. There's controversy for sure, but it's like a business. Like I've rented production space from the Scientologists before.
It's the same as Heaven's Gate, like with their production company, their like film stuff. Like I always say this to you, if my film career ever fails, I'll just go to Scientology and I'll start making their movies for them.
Yeah, it's actually really impressive, not to go on some like pro Scientology rant here, but we rented space and filmed at the Scientology Celebrity Center in Los Feliz, and the grounds are beautiful. It was built by the same people that built the Chateau Marmont, and so it looks like the chateau inside and the grounds look like it, but they've got the area we rented, it was for a scene where we were having an awards show. And so we needed like a conference center, but something that looked really upscale. And they had one and it was great. But their band was practicing while we were there. So we had to like work around their band practicing. And their band was playing songs by the band Muse,
Oh my God.
which is like sci-fi rock.
Yeah.
And so you're hearing these songs that are all like written from the perspective of this character that's battling against these like evil galactic forces. And then you realize that's what Scientology is. That's their belief system. And so to see operationally the way that worked, it was really cool. It was really interesting to get to see the inside there and see how it worked and see kind of like how well oiled of a machine their production company and their I guess like their entertainment side of their religion is.
Yeah, that's nuts.
Is it a religion? Does Scientology call itself a religion?
Yeah, I think so.
Interesting. Let's set aside the like all the controversies of what they like supposedly they audit you and take all of your information and find out all the bad things you've done and they hold it against you before you leave. That's the claim, right? Mm-hmm. But don't most religions do that? Isn't that like, okay, so like I went to Catholic school and grew up Catholic. And when so there's this thing called confession in Catholicism where you can go and tell the priest anything, and you're forgiven. Mm-hmm. And
did you do that ever?
You've got, I mean, I was like 9, so I hadn't done anything bad. But yeah, the things you feel bad about, whatever, you thought bad thoughts about somebody, or you were mean to someone, or whatever, you questioned, here's a big one, questioned your belief in God. So you go and confess these things, and then they're like, all right, do this, do that, say 9 Hail Marys, and tell your mother you love her, and you're forgiven. But isn't that the same thing? Aren't they just collecting information on you? And then if you go to leave, they're like, well, God knows you did this stuff. Like, and this is not me, by the way, I don't know any of this. I've like studied the Scientology thing very minimally. I've watched a couple documentaries, but I feel like it's really easy to point fingers and laugh at Scientology because it's modern, and I don't know why, but I have a much harder time believing in something that seems unbelievable to me if somebody came up with these ideas now, because we have so much information. So like Scientology was invented or discovered or whatever in like what, the 40s or 50s? And like we had jets, all right? Like we'd figure some things out by then. There was television, there was mass media.
There's a lot about the founder. I can't remember exactly.
L. Ron Hubbard.
Yeah. Just a lot of stuff about former cult members and how he would like, when he started this, he had a friend who he told everything to, like, I want to start a cult. I want to get all these people involved. Like, he had a motive behind it. And he did some awful things, like, with his ex-wife. And, like, I think because it's so relevant and, like, current and, like, new, and you can, like, kind of see exactly the process of it becoming Scientology, that's, like, where it's different than Catholicism or something that like was created whenever it was.
So it's just that it's older. It's just easier to believe that when we had less information and we came up with these ideas that we now have an easier time believing that, because people didn't know as much then.
Because there's word of mouth now.
Right. Well, there was word of mouth then. But yeah, so what I remember hearing about the origins of Scientology is that L. Ron Hubbard was a science fiction author. And his career wasn't going the way he wanted it to go, and that he said to another science fiction author at a science fiction convention, if we really wanted to make money, we'd go into religion. And then like 3 years later, he rolls up with Scientology.
Yeah.
And I don't know how apocryphal that is or how accurate, or is this the kind of thing that this other author, once Scientology started, said that happened, but it didn't. Wait, I am totally a Scientology apologist, is the way this is coming across. I'm making a lot of justifications for this.
I think you are.
I've thought about it. When I lived in LA, I almost went to like take that. I was always curious. I wanted to talk.
I am too. I think most people are.
As for anyone who doesn't know, if you're in Los Angeles, particularly in Hollywood, walking around, there are these like little Scientology outposts, and there'll be someone standing out there on Friday nights, and what do they say? Like, would you like to become the best version of yourself? Yeah, I would.
Something along those
I'd
lines.
love to.
I also, it's very Big Brother whenever I drive by the one in, what is it? It's Silver Lake, right? Like, um, people are wearing like these really like 50s suits, like blue, like dark blue suits. They have like these weird speakers throughout the buildings and they're playing songs in different like ads and it feels very 1984.
If I were to create a religion right now, it would be technology based for sure. But that's also like Scientology comes out of the space age, right? In like the 40s, 50s, 60s, everybody was obsessed with space.
Yeah.
And I mean, that's the era of Star Trek. And I guess then it makes sense if I were going to create a religion or a cult. And also, why does any religion that's created now become a cult? That's another really good question. Is
I don't
why
think
aren't these older
that's
religions cults?
necessarily true.
Can you point to me one recent religion that has not been accused of or considered to be a cult?
How recent? God,
100 years.
I don't know.
Well, I want to find one. That's going to be our research assignment, is to find some modern religions that aren't considered cults, because I think it's that same thing. I think it's
Like Mormonism is the most recent thing that I can think of that wouldn't be considered really a cult.
but also there's a lot of, speaking of like the South Park guys did a whole Book of Mormon, a whole play about it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
there's a lot of controversy amongst
But there's controversy in all religions.
there is controversy in all religions.
I
And
don't think. I don't
yeah,
know.
why
I don't
is there? What's the only non-controversial religion is like Buddhism, which doesn't consider itself
Yeah,
to be a
it's
religion.
not a religion. Yeah.
Is that because belief is so much more powerful than fact? So it's like you believe something different than I believe. This is a problem between us, or something you believe must be wrong because it's not what I believe. So I'm going to go look to poke holes in your belief. Whereas I guess, I mean, now facts are under question. In the
Yeah.
past 5 years, facts aren't facts anymore. There's always, it's debatable what's real, what's fact. I guess this is even more to my point of why today, if I were to create a religion, it would be based on the internet or AI. There's got to be an AI cult or AI religion out there, right?
I'm sure. There are so many that we've never even heard of.
And I'm sure that there's some sociological like exact definition of what is a cult versus what is a religion. And I think a lot of it revolves around unfair power structures and exploitation. But I feel like if you look deep enough into any of the major religions, you find those things too.
Yeah.
It's just
They're
more
all
formal.
manipulative. Yeah. They're not outright like telling you that they're going to like sacrifice you, but I guess in the end that's what happens anyway. Like if you die, you go somewhere, you're sacrificing something for society.
Well, I think, but also a lot of people get a lot of good from religion, right? It gives a lot of meaning to their lives.
Yeah.
But then who are we if there isn't, yeah, just if there's not a bad end to a cult, if there's no like abuse of people, abuse of power, no death at the end, if it's just
Then it's a religion.
right. But if you take any of those, like look in some of the religions, like obviously there's a lot of examples of abuse at a fairly extreme level within the Catholic Church, like horrible stuff, right? And it was just organized and covered up. And if that stuff was happening in a backyard somewhere, we would call it a cult. It seems like if you have some of the, let's look at what is a cult. Let's look at the definition of a cult. A system of religious veneration and devotion directed toward a particular figure or object. A relatively small group of people having religious beliefs or practices regarded by others as strange or sinister.
It also, there's a lot of stuff about like isolationism.
Yeah,
We
I just
talked
looked
about
up.
this with the TikTok cult. Like it totally, it makes you super vulnerable and susceptible to like fully committing to it and taking what they say, like all of their words, super seriously because you don't have anyone else around you to kind of like level you out.
Man, I'm going to. Oh, this is interesting. Yeah, doomsday cults and UFO cults, political cults. Yeah, the cults tend to be focused on whatever is like the predominant theme or thing that people are interested in that in any particular era. And the cults tend to, similar to what we talked about with horror movies, cults tend to reflect the society that they're born out of.
Yeah, for sure. I
And
also think that that makes sense because like a cult like 10 years ago, whatever their beliefs were, now like probably no one would even think that that was like okay to join. Like, you know what I mean?
I
Like I
do.
feel like they
Why?
have a small like period of survival.
Because because usually everybody kills himself at the end.
Even if they
Yeah.
didn't, like the belief sets are so like narrow to that specific era.
But imagine this, and this isn't me, this isn't some like anti-Christianity thing by any means, far from it. Let me take you back 2,000 years. And you've got this guy who claims that he's the son of God and that he's just some dude in sandals, long hair, beard. He's walking around, he's saying that his mother was a virgin, he's the son of God. He was born into the world to save mankind from its own natural born sin, that you have to follow him. You have to give up all your possessions and follow him, and he's going to show you the way of light and love and God. What are the disciples? They're a cult. They are a cult. It is
It's
it
just
is
like
if you look.
crazy to me that like people immediately believed that, and then like there are things that like Galileo said about like the stars in the galaxy, and people like excommunicated and were like, "You're so stupid." Like it's really crazy.
What's interesting about it is that it like and the leader dies and
Yeah.
then is revealed to only the disciples again after his death. Like, take all of this and put it into a modern day context. If there's some hippie walking down the street who's like, bro, or like let's take it, let's not even do that. That's too like Jesus Christ Superstar. That's too 70s. Let's take it and it's some modern internet crypto bro who says, I'm going to show you the way to freedom. You guys have to understand, I am the child of all of the knowledge of the sum of the internet. The internet has given all of its knowledge to me, and I am going to make you rich, and I am going to give you freedom in your life that you've never had before. All you have to do is give up your old way of life and follow me. What
This
is
sounds
that?
like an Andrew Tate course. This sounds like so crazy. But
Exactly.
people believe it. People believed that. People bought into that.
And is that is the modern day version. Like, how many other charismatic leaders were there similar to Jesus walking around at that same time whose stories just didn't stick? And why didn't they
Yeah.
stick? Weren't they as well documented? So, okay, a modern Jesus would definitely be into crypto, would definitely be deeply on the internet, would probably have a podcast, would probably have a YouTube channel, would probably be a Twitch streamer. Like for all we know, Kai Cenat is the next Messiah. But
Mafia.
seriously, the having the disciples who wrote the Bible, who were able to get it out, and then you've got this thing, the Gutenberg press, that ends up being able to print the Bible and send it out all over the world. It's this very odd set of circumstances that leads to Christianity becoming this very dominant world force. And I don't know, I'm not as well studied in, I guess, the other dominant religions, even though I've taken plenty of comparative religion courses. I don't remember some of it. This Christianity stuff sticks with me the most just because of Catholic school and always being obsessed with it. And honestly, the Last Temptation of Christ, both the book and the movie. I was really obsessed with those. So I've often like put myself in that position and thought about like what it was like to live at that time and be a follower of his. But I challenge someone, maybe it's us. Somebody should make that movie of taking everything that Jesus was doing in that time and the ideas and translating that into today's world and what that would look like for a Messiah to come who could, using what's available today, create a religion that would have sticking power 2,000 years from now. I would be really interested to see what that looked like. And I promise you, people call Andrew Tate a cult. Like, I promise you that people would say that that was a cult. And it's like a cult isn't a cult once it becomes popular enough. Then all of a sudden, it's just a religion. Because when I'm looking at these, like these definitions of a cult, like sure, there's features of it that the abuse of power and all those things. But when you look at like an idea rejected by most, centralized around a charismatic figure, bro, that is every religion. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's politics too. Yeah. Like look at politics. In politics today, you've got fringe ideas that come to the mainstream because they coalesce around an individual who becomes the leader of that group of ideas. Mm-hmm. So like we're surrounded by cults everywhere. Maybe cults are the way of human life. Maybe humanity only gets by in cults. Like, what is a company? What is a company if not a group of like Elon Musk? Yeah. Charismatic individual, gets people to believe in stuff that nobody else would have believed in. Mm-hmm. Electric cars becoming popular, putting people on Mars. Mm-hmm. How is that not a cult? Everything's a cult. I know. Everything's a cult.
I fully believe it.
So where do we go from here?
Let's start a cult.
Wow, nice use of the title. We start a cult or join one. Because we're left out. If you're not in a cult, are you really even living?
I mean, one could say that solo movie going is a cult.
It is a cult. Yeah. We can make it a cult. I would get down with that. Yeah. All right, so that's what we're doing. We saw Let's Start a Cult, and it inspired us to start a cult. Well, we already started the cult. We just hadn't called it a cult yet. But I feel like now that we call it a cult, we will get our cult-like following.
For sure.
I need to grow my beard longer. This is not a cult leader beard.
It's really not. The outfit isn't either.
Oh, no. Yeah. Wow, I just declared myself leader. Did you hear that? Yeah. You can be my chip.
Okay. Cool.
All right, so you said reviews are good. What's Letterboxd have to say?
Let's look. They got an 84% on Rotten Tomatoes.
That's really good.
That's really high. It's actually shocking to me because of this type of movie. I was literally just thinking about how Twitch streamers and podcasts are culty. I'm like so invested in them.
You are definitely in the H3 cult.
It's kind of unfortunate. It's actually crazy.
Wow, nice. The top review on Let's Start a Cult. Yeah. Lovingly captures the no-nonsense spirit of 90s comedies. Catch it in theaters now. Best enjoyed with the crowd. I love this. Wow. I love that this guy wrote this. This is amazing.
This is amazing. As a Stavros fan, as an AMC listener, as a supporter of cinema, I paid money to see this film alone on a Sunday night in an empty theater. And you best believe I took cart rips in an empty theater, and I think Stavi would approve. That's a great solo movie-going experience.
That's good. Can you friend request people on Letterboxd? I feel like we need to reach out to that person and let them know. Yeah.
Go to their profile and follow them.
Okay.
It's a true form of social media, which is another cult.
Social media is definitely a cult. Who's the figure that social media is organized around? Mark Zuckerberg?
Probably. The fact that Mark Zuckerberg was in my dream the other night is crazy.
I don't know if I'd be telling people that publicly.
No, we were trying to stop him from a
I know.
schemey thing.
I remember.
Yeah, that's crazy. I'm just clarifying for the public that I wasn't
Right.
fantasizing about Mark Zuckerberg.
No, he was the villain of Kaya's dream, and yeah, we were
Mm-hmm.
colluding to take him down. I think you distracted him while I hacked him, right?
Yep.
Yeah, these are pretty good Letterboxd reviews. Letterboxd
Yeah.
seems to have liked it. I love
My
when my
favorite
enemies
thing is
perish.
people always say Stavy baby. That's my favorite.
That's his name, his nickname.
That's what yeah.
Okay, yeah, these are good.
Mm-hmm.
What's the consensus from Letterboxd? It's
What is it?
wait, don't you have a theory on this? Like every movie ends up with like the same Letterboxd consensus.
Yeah.
Yeah, they all end up right in the middle.
Especially this one doesn't have a ton of reviews yet because it was like a smaller release and now it's going to be I don't know when it's going to be distributed, but and where? Do you know where?
I mean, it is being distributed in theaters right now. I think it'll probably go
Not
to VOD.
anymore.
It's not.
It was like it was literally 3 days here.
I saw it's in Grand Rapids. It's in some places. I think it's just. I think it's just popping around. I think it's a smaller release. It's like a platform release. So it's. Oh, okay. So the Rotten Tomatoes, these are mostly fan reviews. There's like
Oh, wow.
three. There's three actual critic reviews, but still, it's two fresh, one rotten.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think it needs to be that serious.
Yeah, I loved it. I want more of this. And it got us seriously thinking about starting a cult. So was that its purpose?
Honestly,
Is that why
it
they
might
made
have
this?
been. Yeah. Normalize cults.
Yeah, well, I think cults are normalized. They just have to get big enough
Yeah.
first.
I'm not even gonna air out my friend, but like my friend was almost part of a cult. And like we've talked about it before and it's crazy.
Okay, so protect your friend's anonymity while giving us some of the details.
He was just like in a vulnerable stage in his life and like his friend was a huge part of this cult and there was one leader that you like devote everything to in like very weird ceremonies, but he said like the one ceremony he did do, it made him feel like a sense of clarity and like he got answers from the leader or the maestro is what you would call it. But he said it was so weird and he was so susceptible to it and to believing that this like teacher was sort of curing him. I don't know. I just think it's
So
crazy.
So why do cults need a central figure to organize around? I guess is the question.
I
Why
don't
couldn't it just
know.
be a central idea? And I mean, is it the same as
I've heard of some cults that are focused around a central idea. Like there's like an underground cult and they have like this water underground and it like their whole religion is about the water.
but what are the organizing principles? Is it like democratic or is there I mean, that's the weird thing too is even like in a you could be like the United States, you could be a representative democracy where there are still leaders and a leader, but then ultimately centralized around democratic ideals and sort of collective governance. Do we need, as humans, as social creatures, is there something about having a leader that's important? Do we look to a leader? Are there followers and leaders, and can an organization work without a leader?
I think we do need some sort of leader. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, even in like the strictest like Marxist-Leninist communism, you had Lenin and Marx. So then, why is it a problem? All right, for cults to organize around a central figure. That's seen as one of the problems of a cult, right? Belief system
I think-
outside the ordinary, okay. but you're organized around a central figure. That's seen as being problematic.
I think a part of it, why it's controversial, is probably because of the fact like that they chose. I mean, in most communities, like there is like a chosen leader, and a lot of the time they do choose themselves, and that's when you get into trouble. And I think that's the same with a cult. It's because they
The
weren't,
leader chose themselves.
Yeah.
So what if you were to get a whole bunch of people together, you were to agree on a set of beliefs, and you were to vote on who's the leader?
I think that would be different than a cult.
Would it become a cult? Or what if you had to vote a new leader in every year? Like, all right, on the solstice every year, we are going to vote in a new leader.
I think it would be a better setup. I don't think cults do that.
Maybe there's more diversity amongst types of cults than we think.
Yeah.
Or maybe this goes back to the question that we asked earlier, are there examples of modern or contemporary religions that aren't considered cults?
Yeah. I think a big thing is like cults have like founders. And that's just, and since they're typically like so short-lived that like they're kind of just the ultimate leader. There's no like terms necessarily like, I don't know, like
a set of bylaws, like a declaration of cult dependence.
Yeah. I mean, you could probably argue that the start, before we had like all of our amendments and rights and whatever, that America could have been a cult. I don't know.
Who's the leader, Benjamin Franklin or George Washington or Thomas Jefferson?
See, we don't know. We didn't have rules.
So, but like, okay, so there has to be somebody to start something. And inherently, that person's going to become the leader because they started it. Like, if you and I set out to start a cult, let's say Solo Moviegoers Club became a movie cult, we would be the leaders because we started it.
Yes.
And then we gathered other people.
But would we have ultimate power is the problem.
Interesting. So the solo movie-going crowd is already a vulnerable population because they're alone. And there's two of us.
Very true.
I wonder how many people, you know what I would feel really bad about? If I tried to start a cult and I failed. If I tried to start one and nobody would follow me. How often does that happen?
I don't know.
Like, there's nothing worse than trying to start something like that and failing.
This is true.
I'm trying to think of like an analogous situation, but I can't think of one necessarily. Oh, it's like failing at being a criminal.
Yeah.
Like you're living outside of the boundaries of the law and you can't even do that right. Mm-hmm. But I guess most criminals fail at being criminals. They almost always end up in jail or getting killed.
Yeah.
There's no like good end to the criminal life. So is there a good end to the cult life? Couldn't you be, let's find this. I want to see this. I want this to be the big next Netflix documentary. Is the cult where nothing goes wrong. The utopian cult.
I don't really understand what that would be. Would it just be like a functioning society?
Yes, it would just be a functioning society that was organized around a set of beliefs with a charismatic leader. Show me that. I want to see that, and I want to see it work, and I want to go investigate it, like hardcore investigate it, and find out.
Do our research. Like, I think we should set this up and then document it.
I think we should too. Do we have? Okay, this could be unprecedented. We might end up with an episode 2 of Let's Start a Cult. That's like a Shane Dawson style.
Oh my god, that's a cult.
we're going to do a Shane Dawson style investigatory podcast to find a cult where nothing's wrong. To find a cult that's a net positive.
Okay.
I bet it's out there.
Yeah, me too.
I mean, it's probably in California. Not to generalize, but you guys have lots of cults.
Yeah, there has to be something. We're doing that.
All right. Last thing for out of our cult tangent. Oh, it's not a tangent. This is a movie about cults. This is not a tangent. This is all on topic.
Everyone wants a tangent. I mean, come on now.
Which character do you want to be? Would you, if you had to be one character, who would you want to be?
Chip.
Yeah.
Chip.
Duh. This, I've never had to think less about which character I would be. He's super endearing.
In jail, he got the kid. He got the friends. He got the success.
Yeah, he got everything.
Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's it.
Yeah, I guess we just have to do some research.
Yeah, until we pick up on a part 2. More to come. Peace.
Bye.